Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before we rank each episode against each other. Today's episode is One Piece East Blue Saga Baratia Arc, Episode 21, An Unexpected Guest, Sanji's Food, and Gin's Grace. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happened within this episode. So the episode begins with Patty giving himself a bit of a pep talk and practicing how to talk to customers in the mirror before he starts his shift, and then he walks out of the bathroom into the dining room and sees Sanji having beaten up Full Body, and basically the other cooks come out and try to hold Sanji back, who is still trying to get at Full Body, who's threatening to shut down the restaurant. And eventually then a Marine comes over and he's bloodied and he tells Full Body, like, oh my gosh, pirates, you know, run away. And Full Body then makes his escape, getting kicked out. And we then move on to Gin's arrival, who he comes in, demands a table. He's part of a famous pirate group, the Craig Pirates. And most of the customers, get nervous by this. Patty declines him service because he is not able to pay, beats him up, kicks him out. However, Sanji decides to begin cooking for him and then does bring out a tray of food or a plate of food to him, saying that he knows what it's like to be starving and it's not charity. Gin then eats the food gratefully. And Luffy, who observes this scene, decides Sanji's a great guy and asks him to join his crew, refusing his refusal and basically counting him already as a member of the crew despite Sanji's protests and him saying that there's a reason that he needs to stay working at the restaurant. Gin then finds out that Luffy wants to go to the Grand Line, talks about how terrible the experience that his fleet had there, because the Craig fleet went to the Grand Line and they've come back in disgrace, and it was so fast once they got there that it is basically so horrifying. He recommends not going there, especially with only 5 people counting Sanji. But Luffy says he's going to go anyways. Gin says that's his right to do so, and sails off, having thanked Sanji. Luffy then goes in and begins his role as a chore boy, and at first he just sits there observing all the cooks cook. They then get angry at him for doing nothing and say, if you're going to just sit there, might as well go clean some dishes, sweep the floors. So Luffy then goes and attempts to wash dishes. However, he fails utterly at this, and then they basically were like, get out of the kitchen. So he heads out to the dining room where he sees Namizaru and Usopp having a meal already, and he's a bit upset. Like, they kind of make fun of him for being a chore boy for a year, and he's a bit upset that they're eating yummy food without him. So he decides to put a booger in Zoro's water, and then that backfires because he's the one who's forced to drink it. The table then erupts into laughter, causing a big scene while he rolls around on the floor. This brings Sanji's attention over to them, and he comes over to scold them, but then he spots Nami, and basically, because he is a bit of a philanderer, decides to hit on her. And Zeph basically then comes in and is like, you know what, Sanji, why don't you go be a pirate with them? We don't actually need you here. And Sanji, of course, is angry at this because he's determined to stay. And then we cut scene to Gin arriving at Craig's ship, which is run down, and basically tells him about the grace that he was given and the food that he was given at Bratty, and Craig basically says, take me there, and Gin says that he will. And that is where we end this. That's the last scene. Now that we have been reminded about what happened within the episode, it's now time to rank the episode. As always, we'll be ranking on our 2 ranking lists, the mostly objective ranking and the personal ranking after that. Alright, so now we'll start with our mostly objective rank values. And the first point that I'm going to give is to our single arc supporting character introductions. which is Patty and Carney, who are supporting characters within this arc. They may cameo at times in the future, but they never really become like a important character beyond this arc. And they are each worth 1 point each. Then we have our single arc main character introduction, which is Gin, who is the first of the Craig pirates that we meet and does maintain an important role throughout this arc in the fight against Craig. We do get Craig teased at the end of the episode, but he's not seen on screen. It's just his voice, and he doesn't do anything except be there at the very end asking to go to Beretti. And so he's not worth points this time, but Gin is, and that is worth 2 points. We then have our multi-arc main character development, which has to do with getting to know Sanji a little bit better. We have Sanji feeding Gin, despite the fact that all of the other all of the other cooks on Brady refuse because he cannot pay, and this is indicated to us because he knows what it's like to starve, though that hasn't been expanded on yet. It's hinted that there's a history there. He then gets his first invitation into Luffy's crew in this episode. And then at the end of the episode, when he meets Nami, he is revealed to be a philanderer. And it really sucks because Sanji is probably would be my favorite character if he didn't philander. You know, if he could like pick a girl and commit to her and be like a loyal person or even just tone down his philandering, I feel like he would be almost the perfect character. You know, he cooks, he's nicely dressed in a suit. He has good morals, integrity, honor, apart from the philandering side of things. Like, he would have been such an amazing character if he wasn't a philanderer. But everybody needs a flaw, so we'll count that as his big flaw. And either way, very likable character, so I do like that we're starting to hint at his history, but also that he has been invited to the crew, which basically signals that he is going to be part of the crew, which, spoilers, yeah, you should know he is definitely going to join the crew in the end. And anyways, that was 4 points. And then the only negative that we have for this episode is the negative messaging or behavior. And this one, it's not serious, like it's not criminal or anything, but it just has to do with general politeness and courtesy to others. When you go to a restaurant, people like to, sit down, have a good time, and yes, you may hear the murmur of voices around you because people will be having conversations at other tables. But there's a difference from that to somebody, screaming, banging on the table, rolling around on the floor, causing this huge scene, and basically making it so that you aren't able to enjoy your meal as another guest. It's just, like I said, it's impolite, uncourteous behavior. And I think it's worth calling out, though, again, it's not serious, it's not criminal, and honestly, these are teenagers who are roaming around pirating. So, I mean, how polite do you really expect them to be? But either way, I still think it's worth, like I said, calling out the very poor behavior. And so that is worth a -2 points. And that then leaves us with a total of 6 points out of 10 for this episode. And that brings our arc rankings so far and our mostly objective ranking to in first, Past of the Three Swords, The Promise Between Zoro and Kuna. Second, The Famous Cook, Sanji of the Floating Restaurant. And third, The Unexpected Guest, Sanji's Food and Gin's Grace. So my personal ranking for this episode may seem a little bit harsh, but I still think personally that it is fair. So I do think that the episode felt kind of like we're building to something, right? And unfortunately, not a lot of interest really happened. We get the tail end of Full Body running away from the Craig pirates. We get Gin coming in, wanting food, getting kicked out, being fed by Sanji. We get some hints that there's a backstory there, but we're not really informed of what it is yet. Luffy invites him to the crew because he's a good guy. They then have a conversation about how scary the Grand Line is, like everybody who's talked about it to date has said. It's scary. And, then Luffy starts his chores. And then there's that scene at the end where, they disrupt the restaurant. And then we get teased that Craig is now going to be coming to the restaurant, which again is setting up that, oh, something's going to happen. But like, really, entertainment value wise, it just wasn't there for me. I found the disruption to the restaurant just personally offensive because I'm a very polite person and I do not like discourtesy and unpoliteness. And if I was a patron of that restaurant, I would have been very annoyed. Annoyed enough that I probably wouldn't be back. Just saying. Not that the restaurant did anything, but the behavior of them was just a little bit not great. But again, that's like more of a minor thing. Like it annoyed me personally, but like I wouldn't take too many points for it. But then, the conversation with Gin, it was kind of boring to watch. He just gulped food, then they just had like a little bit of a powwow. But entertainment value wise, there wasn't really anything engaging about it. Luffy starts his chores. That was funny. That was probably the shining little portion of the episode where he was, first sitting there watching them all freak out about how they're so busy because they don't have any waiters anymore. And then also then they send him to do the dishes, and as he's washing the dishes, he's like literally rubbing them a bit with water and then breaking them. And like Patty comes over, he's like, "How many dishes have you broken?" Once they hear the noise, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, I forgot to count." Like he's supposed to be breaking the dishes and he's not supposed to. And then he gets sent out, and then of course there's the immediately going over to his friends. And then the booger thing in Zoro's thing, I'm just like, "Oh, that's just I have sensibilities and that just totally offends them." I was disgusted by it, but at least it did come back around on him, and he was the one who was made to eat his booger, or drink his booger, rather. But I still think that's rather disgusting. But yeah, I didn't have a strong impression. There was a glimpse of comedy there, and otherwise it was kind of like, I could take it or leave it. Which is why I decided to give this episode a 3 out of 10. And that brings our ranking so far for the personal ranking to in first, the Pass of the Three Swords, the promise between Zoro and Kuina. Second, the famous cook, Sanji of the floating restaurant. And then this episode comes in third, an unexpected guest, Sanji's food and Gin's grace. So far, we actually have the actual episode order in our rankings. It would seem it started strong and has been getting progressively worse, though. Do not worry, I know. Spoilers, this is a rewatch. They do get better. I know it. Bringing us to our saga ranking so far, which is of course where we are ranking each of the arcs within the East Blue Saga. And on our mostly objective ranking, in first place we have Romance Dawn arc with a score of 86.67%. Second place, Orangetown arc with 76%. And then in third place, Syrup Village arc with 64%. Bratty arc is still pending, and it currently has a score of 26 out of a possible 120. Meanwhile, on our personal ranking side, in first place we have the Orangetown arc, which of course was Buggy's arc, with 74%. Second place, the Romance Dawn arc with 66.67%. And then in third place, Syrup Village arc with a score of 49%. And then again, pending Brady arc currently has a score of 18 out of a possible 120. And we now come to our final segment, which is our series rankings so far. This is where we are going to be ranking each of the sagas against each other, and the scores are determined based on how each of the arcs do. So far for our East Blue Saga, we have a score of 20 out of 80. And then on the personal ranking side, we have a score of 12 out of 80. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked One Piece East Blue Saga Baratie Arc, Episode 21, An Unexpected Guess, Sanji's Food and Gin's Grace. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.